Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to take a look at recreating the parallax scrolling effect from 2D games. So in the early days of 2D games, they tried to make the environment look three-dimensional by having a series of images progressively drawn into the distance, and each one would move slower to try to give a sense of distance. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So this is a 2D project, not a 3D project. We have to do a little prep work first. So this is the image that you can use. If you want for each layer, you could use a different image. We're just going to focus on one image to keep this simple because I don't want you to be distracted by the visuals. I want you just to focus on the coding and the functionality, which is usually the approach I'll take to these tutorials. So here's our image. Now, in a 2D project, I believe this usually defaults to Sprite 2D UI. So for this particular procedure, you need this to be set to default. So just change that to default. And wrap mode needs to be repeat. I'm not sure if this defaults to clamp, but either way, make sure this is repeat. So texture type needs to be default. Wrap mode needs to be repeat. I don't believe there's any other changes that need to be made. If you make those changes, go ahead and click on apply. So that's the image. We now have to take that image and apply it to a material. So you would right click and choose create, and then you would choose material. Well, I've already done that and it's right here. So what you want to choose, I chose shader, unlit, transparent. There is a variety of settings that you can do for this. I just did this for simplicity's sake. If you use a lit shader, then you have to start worrying about lighting and things like that. Again, I want to show you the basic functionality and that, like, as I always say, this is an iterative process. You can build onto that later. So in this case, it's going to be unlit, transparent. So unlit, transparent. So again, that background needs to be transparent. Okay, so you take your image, you drag and drop it here, and then you need to set your tiling. Why? Because you don't want to have dozens and dozens of objects moving around. You want to have as few as possible to keep it simple. So each tile will redraw the cloud. So I set it to 12. So now let's go ahead and create an object. We're going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, and we're going to do Plane. And we will center this, so 0, 0, 0. Now the z-axis for the most part does not matter in a 2D environment with one exception. If this is behind the camera, then the camera won't see it. Other than that, you can't do any kind of layer with the z-axis. You have to use the sorting order or the order in layer, okay? And we need to rotate this towards the camera. There we go. So it looks like it needs to be -90. Okay, let's go ahead and shrink this because we don't want it to be that big. We want this to be the height of one cloud layer. So let's make this like, say, 0.1. And now let's see, element here, so material. For some reason, I notice that sometimes this is not expanded, so you might have to expand material in the mesh renderer component. You can see it has the default material. We want to use our material. There is our cloud. So they look a little bit squished. So what we're going to do, we can scale the object itself. So, and there's a couple ways to do this. You can alter how many tiles you have, or you can alter the size. Well, we're going to alter the size because you can see it doesn't even fit the screen, that it's way too small. So we're going to scale out the size of the object. And at this point, I want to say that some of the things I'm going to do are arbitrary based on the image I'm using. So you might tweak this differently. You might be using a much smaller image, you might be using a much larger image, and so you might be able to have different settings for this, okay? So what we're going to do, we are going to scale the X 2, 3, and the reason why I'm going to scale well beyond is I'm going to want to have this be repeated over and over again without having to create. I'm going to duplicate the same object. I don't want to have to recreate a new unique object. So by scaling this beyond the size of the screen, I could reuse this for the other layers. I probably did not explain that well, but you'll see in a second. So let's go 3.5. We'll take that. We'll put that at the bottom. And then what we're going to do, we're going to apply a script to it. We're going to walk through the script, and then we're going to be 90% done. At that point, it's just going to be copying and pasting this. So let's take our script, apply it to that object, and then let's see what we got. Okay, so public float scroll speed. So self-explanatory. So this is the type of variable, this is the name of the variable, and this is the value set to the variable. We're going to have a float of 0.5. Again, arbitrary, you can set whatever speed you want. Private renderer, image renderer. So this is going to be used to grab the renderer so that we can make modifications to it. And then public int sort ord. So clearly this is going to be used for the sorting order because again, in a 2D project, Z is irrelevant, again, as long as it's in front of the camera. So void start image renderer, so that's that variable right there, get component renderer. So get component, if there's nothing in front of it, what this is doing is it's getting the component of the object the script is attached to. The object the script is attached to is the cloud object. It's this plane. And so it's going to take that component and link it to this variable. Get component renderer dot sorting order sort ord. So what this is doing, again, this is getting the renderer of the object the script is attached to, but now it's making a difference. It's saying take the current sorting order and set it to this variable, which is here. Because this is public, we're going to be able to set it in the inspector, and that's how we're going to change the sorting order. So this line here is simply saying take the value from the inspector and apply it to the individual objects. In the update section, this is what gets updated on each frame. So float offset equals time dot time times scroll speed. So basically this is looking at how much time has passed and multiplying it by the scroll speed. So basically you're adjusting for frame rate is what you're doing. Because if you just did the offset, since the update is based on frame rate, if you had a lower frame rate, you would have one scroll speed. If you had a higher frame rate, you would have a higher scroll speed. So this is adjusting for that. And now we're just bringing it all together. So image renderer, so the renderer attached to the object, the image, excuse me, the renderer component that's part of this object. So image renderer dot material, remember we talked about making this material. So image render dot material set texture offset, pretty straightforward. You're going to offset the texture, quote underscore main text. This is literal, so it needs to be exactly this, comma new vector 2, so 2D. Since it's a texture, it's 2D. Offset, comma 0. So again, we are using that variable. So we're offsetting, I believe that would be x, because vectors are usually x, y, and then if there is one, z. So we're offsetting the x position with that variable. And that's it for the coding. So now what happens, we have our object. So here's our scroll speed, 0.5. Let's put it sort order, let's use 5. And one of the nice things about having this be the same number, obviously it's a different value, but it's the same digit, is you, instead of manually doing this in the work area, you could have this be instantiated using code. So I'll explain in just a second what I mean. So we're going to copy and paste that. Now that it's all set, we're going to bring this to the top of the screen. And that's our closest layer. So now what we do, we take those, we copy them, we paste them, we move this one up slightly, we move this one down slightly, and now what we do is we change that sorting order. So we change the sorting order to 4 and the scroll speed to 4. So that's what I was talking about, is by keeping the digits the same, you could easily do this in coding, because you could have the scroll speed just be 1/10 of the sort order number. Again, we set this one to 0.4 and this one to 4. And again, for the exact effect you want, you are going to probably use different numbers, but it's the principle that each layer has to be, as you're going inwards, each layer has to be a progressively lower sort order, so because it's in the distance, because the higher the number, that's what's on top, okay? And so as you're going towards the center of the screen, or just vertically lower on the screen, however you want to see it, you're using a lower sort order and a lower scroll speed. I suppose there might be a reason why you want the inner one to move faster. I just can't think of what that would be. And now let's just rinse and repeat. Copy, paste, and again, change scroll speed, 0.3, sort order 3, scroll speed 3, scroll order, excuse me, scroll speed 3. And so it's just rinse and repeat however many layers you want. Now, the one thing that I didn't do, which I mentioned at the beginning, is I said I was scrolling these way off to the side. Now, because the object itself is not actually moving, okay, the object itself, the texture is just scrolling in place and it creates an illusion of movement, then you would say, okay, well, you don't need these. Well, the reason are here is if you want the additional effect of things looking smaller, you can now just scale this in to say 3.2, and we'll make this one 3.2, and then we'll make this one say 2.8, and make this one 2.8. So I really should have been doing that right along. And even as a still image, you get this sense of depth, okay? Now I didn't change the vertical. You could change the vertical too, so make these a little bit squashed. So in addition to that, you could also do say point. This is a very small scale, so you gotta be careful not to make it too tiny. So we'll just change it by 1/100th or 1/10th. Sorry, I can't do math at the moment. So 0.9. Oh, no. Oops. Yeah, that's the one I wanted. Sorry. And then this would be 0.8. And so again, you're just scaling the vertical. Okay. So if I haven't forgotten anything, I believe that'll work. Let's just take a quick look. So scale is changing, and scroll speed is changing. If you want, what you could actually do, you could actually change this order to make it a little bit easier to check. So that is that one. So because right now the sequence is the top and bottom, so if you kind of want them all lined up, you can just already rearrange this if you wanted to. But I believe that should do it. So let's give this a run and see if I forget anything. Nope, there you go. It's a cartoonish effect, but that is your parallax scrolling. Now you'd probably have it go actually in the opposite direction because you're usually traveling left to right. So you'd probably actually have this scrolling. We did an offset of positive of 0.5, so I believe we just do this as a negative. Wonder if we can just do this through code, because right now this is offset. Could we just do negative offset? Let's see if it accepts the coding, because I don't feel like changing each one of those to a negative. Much better. So yeah, you can just change the coding so it's a negative offset. So say this is a side-scrolling game. Maybe it's a side-scrolling shooter. You got your character here. Stuff is spawning from the left, and you've got stuff in the background, and you've got your parallax scrolling. Now, it's not a really advanced effect because A, it's exactly the same image over and over and over again. Okay, so you might use different images for each layer. And two, the images are very obviously individual images. You might redraw it so it's like it's a continuous cloud, so you can do that, so it's meant to tile better. So there's things like that you can do, but this was really just to give you the basics. So I think that's it. We'll leave it there. I hope that this was useful. I hope that it helps you with whatever project you're working on. If you want to see more things like this, just let me know. Just leave a like, leave a comment. If you haven't, please consider subscribing, because only about 5% of views come from people who are subscribed. And I've done polls, and some people have said that they wish they had been notified and they weren't. Unfortunately, I have no control over that. The best you can do is, like I said, is if you subscribe and you set for notifications. And again, that is your choice if you do that. So please enjoy the rest of your day.